Hello and welcome to Point of View. Last week, Branden Ellis, a college student at Cypress College in Los Angeles, California, was confronted by his teacher when he made the case against cancel culture and canceling, especially the police, in children's shows like Paw Patrol, and he made the case against that, and he was supposed to be debating a fellow class member, and his professor jumped in and started badgering and debating him. We're going to dive into this subject. We're going to play the video. We're going to walk through it. We're going to dive into the subject in today's show and ask, what is the Christian view on this? Is there systemic racism that we should, as Christians, decry from our police officers and from our law enforcement? Or is this just a complete mischaracterization and we should stand behind the police? Where should Christians fall on the issue? Point of View, the show where we look at things from a biblical point of view. We're not ashamed to do that because to be right, you're going to have to be biblical. If the Bible's true, then every bit of truth has to come from the Bible. So let's do that. We're going to break this video down. But first, let me just roll the video and you let me know what you think.
I think cops are heroes and they have to have a difficult job, but we have to have that
All of
fine
them?
life. Oh, I mean, I'd say a good majority of them. You have bad people in every business and every
Yet,
part.
yet
Well,
a lot of police officers have committed atrocious crimes and have gotten away with it and have never been convicted of any of it.
And
And I say
they,
this as a person who has family members who are police officers.
yes, I understand. And this is what I believe. This is my opinion. And this is, not popular to say, but I do support our police, and we have bad people, and the people that do bad things should be brought to justice. I agree with that. But I think that, say it again.
They haven't.
Well, I agree with you on that point of they should, right?
Okay, so what is your
And
bottom line point? You're saying police officers should be revered, viewed as heroes? They
I
belong
think
on
it's,
TV shows with children?
I think they
children
are
watch?
heroes in a sense because they come to your need and they come and help you, and they have a problem just like every other business, but we should fix that.
It's
But I
not
think they're
business.
heroes. Well,
I
they're
think
a
that's the problem,
program.
is looking at it as a business. Because they're actually supposed to protect and serve the people,
They
not
do
kill
protect
them.
us. Who do we call when we're in trouble and someone has a knife or a gun? We
I
call
wouldn't
the
call the
police.
police.
Why wouldn't you call the police?
I don't trust them. My life's in
Why?
more
Who would
danger
you call?
in their presence.
Professor, who would you call?
I wouldn't call anybody.
All right, and can I just say that she looks remarkably similar to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I didn't realize that AOC, I'll just call her AOC, was a professor at Cypress College in Los Angeles. I had no idea, but I suppose you'll learn new things every day. No, but this is this is not AOC as far as I can tell. I don't have the name. I've looked. I can't find her name. Maybe it's being kept private for just for privacy reasons. But this was not the entire video. We're actually going to play the entire video and break it down piece by piece. But I want to give you a little taste of what we're talking about here, because the essential element here is that this student, Branden, is trying to make the case that no, it shouldn't be canceled. Paw Patrol and those types of things are innocent and harmless, and they promote a healthy view of police officers, where the professor is jumping in and saying, no, that's terrible. It's awful that children are being, that police officers are being promoted among children. I mean, I don't. This actually seems to be very confusing and a really bad argument. But her argument basically is police are systemically racist. They're bad people, and in no way, in no circumstance, should children be exposed to positive imaging of police officers. Now, this just seems crazy to me. But let's break down the argument. But before we do, let's talk about some basic principles here. Here's some basic scripture principles that we should be walking into this with. First of all, we should walk into it with the Romans chapter 13 mentality. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. So the principle here is that we do obey the authority that God has given us in the government, provided that that authority is not telling us to do things that are contrary with our conscience. We talked about Pastor Sherwood in London, who was arrested for preaching against homosexuality and offending people. And that, of course, is a totally different thing, right? We should continue to obey God and preach the truth even when the authorities tell us not to. But as long as the authorities aren't telling us not to do something God has commanded us we are to do, or telling us to do something that God has told us not to do, then we are to follow and obey authorities. That's a truth that we know from Christianity, from the Bible. If Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, which we have documented proof of that, then we know the Bible is true and we can trust it and we should follow it. It's the way to please God and to live our lives to the purpose that God has created our lives for. So we know we should obey the authorities, but the question really is, well, hang on, I'll obey them, but shouldn't I politically advocate against wrong authority? And if the police are all racist, then I should be against that. Let me throw in another scripture in here for reference. This is 1 Peter chapter 2. It says, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. So for the Lord's sake, as long as you can submit to that ordinance for the Lord's sake, as long as it's not against God, submit to it. If it's a tax ordinance, if it's a this, if it's a that, as long as it's not telling you you can't worship God or you can't do what God commands you to do, then submit to it. And it says, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, or unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, that's police officers. The king or the governor or those who are sent by them for the punishment of evildoers, right? To enforce the law. That is police. That's law enforcement right there. And for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing ye may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness, but as the servants of God, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Here's an important verse. Verse 21 of that chapter says this, for even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow in his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth, who when he was reviled not again, when he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. So our submission to authority is not saying that that authority is right about everything. It's our picture. It's our way that we picture Christ with our life. Jesus, who submitted to evil men, crucifying him on a cross in the most cruel way because of his love for us. He says, if you love him, you should also submit and follow authority, even when it's bad authority. But that doesn't mean that in a country like America, where we actually have the ability to affect and make a difference in our laws and all those things through election processes, that we shouldn't advocate perfecting our authority, right? So the basic principle of following the law is really can't be emphasized enough. But it doesn't mean that this professor is necessarily wrong. Although I think this professor is coming from a place where she's completely against the police. She probably promotes those who are rioting in the street and disobeying laws and destroying things, looting and stealing. She's probably in support of that. And if that's the case, of course, that's not Christian at all. But let's just break down and analyze her argument and just see if it makes any kind of sense, even if you give it all the benefits of the doubt. Let's say that she's against rioting, she's against looting, she's against disobeying the police, but she thinks the police are systemically racist. And where is her argument wrong if we give her all the benefits of all the doubts? Okay, let's do that. Let's break it down. I think this is queued up at the beginning. Let's see. Let's go to this.
You brought up the police in your speech a few times. So what is your Like, what is your main concern? Since, I mean,
About,
honestly, the whole reason police,
yeah.
I mean, it is systemic. The issue is systemic because the whole reason we have police departments in the first place, where did it stem from? What's our history? Going back to what Jeremy was talking about, what does it stem from? It stems from people in the South wanting to capture runaway slaves.
Okay, we'll stop it right there. Cool. So this is the first major error that the professor is making, and it's the foundation of her argument. She's saying she's cutting through. It seems like she's attempting to cut through the noise, and say no matter what the arguments were from either of these two students that were both presenting their cases. Which, by the way, if two students are presenting their cases in a class like this, you let them present the case. You don't take up one side. I mean, this is bad. This is just being a bad teacher, as on its face. But she's now cutting through all of their arguments, and she's saying we know this is systemic. There's no question. You cannot. It's beyond the realm of what you can debate. The Overton window. As to whether you can debate that the police forces in America are systemic. We know they're systemic. Why, she says? Because of their origin. I mean, if you can't logic through this and see that this is a bad argument, then I don't know how to help you. I mean, the way something started does not always equal the way it is. I can tell you that the first season of The Office was not a great show, but the rest is like it's the greatest show that people will watch. They've watched it more on Netflix than any other show. I'm just saying the way something starts doesn't equal the way that it is. I am not currently, although some may debate this, I am not currently a baby. I started as a baby. So even if police law and law enforcement all began with racism in the Civil War, doesn't mean that they're racist now. Does that make sense? Like that's just a terrible argument that really makes no logical sense whatsoever. There's no tie between if it started for bad purposes, that it has to still be that now. So she's trying to dispel all argument over whether there's systemic racism in the police force by saying it was started with racism, which it wasn't, by the way. It definitely wasn't. And I'll read you a few quotes here to give you some evidence for this. Here's the article on police. I'm reading this from Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is not known to be conservative. In colonial America, policing was initially provided by local elected officials. For instance, the New York Sheriff's Office was founded in 1626. 1626. That's a long time before trying to keep track of the slaves in the 1800s. No, in 1626, the sheriff's office was your law enforcement. And the sheriff's office would hire men to enforce the law. The sheriff was there to enforce the laws that were elected by the people. The Albany County Sheriff's Department in the 1660s, in the colonial period, policing was provided by elected sheriffs and the local militias. So we still had police. Did we have police departments the way we know them today? Not quite, but this was the beginning of police departments in America. And by the way, there were police departments for thousands of years before America was here. So this was just following the same pattern that has always been. Even we read a scripture in the Bible where we had kings and governors and those that the governors send to enforce the law. This is exactly what police officers are, right? They are only as good as the laws they're enforcing. I mean, that's the bottom line. If police officers are enforcing laws that are not good, then those police officers become not good, because they're enforcing bad laws. But it has nothing to do with racism. Now you might have a point about systemic racism if you're saying that our laws are systemically racist. If you can point to a law on the books that is racist, then you can say that police officers enforcing that racist law are then enforcing racism, right? But to say that police officers are racist for enforcing the law, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And there's no actual evidence that ties this to the beginning of slavery, right? There's no, you can't get there from here. Well, I mean, I could go to other places that give you definitions of, there was a New York police department that was founded in the 1800s, 1845. The first city police were established. But again, New York wasn't in the South. They weren't trying to keep track of slaves. And this was 1845. This was before the Civil War. And besides that, just because they all of a sudden started calling them police instead of the sheriff's department doesn't mean that this now somehow changed what was already in place. It was the same thing we have today. It was just had different names and was structured differently. So to say that this is racist is just completely unfounded. And for a professor at a college to be so intellectually shallow and to make arguments like this is pretty sad. It reflects very poorly on your college, Miss Professor, whatever your last name is. Let's continue.
Maybe they shouldn't be heroes. Maybe they don't belong on a kid's show.
So this is the other kid that's debating against Branden, and I don't have his name from any of the stories that I've read. I haven't seen his name. But he's saying maybe they shouldn't be featured on a kid's show. Well, if you want kids to be afraid of the police, then yeah, you probably don't want them watching a show that supports the police and supports a holding a high view of the police. Yeah, you probably don't want that if you want them to be afraid of the police. But if you want them to have respect for the police, and you want them to say, oh, the police that are, to understand that many of the police, most of the police are good, doesn't mean that, then you would want them to be in on a kid's show to help kids understand most police are good. It just depends on what image you want children to have of police. Now, they're going to go on to say that, to admit that most police aren't racist. Well, if most police aren't racist, why don't we reinforce to kids, hey, guys, most police are good. Here's what most police are. Here's an image of police that you should have. Wouldn't that be great? I think that having kids see police officers in a good light is wonderful. Why do you think it is that kids want to fight the police? Why do you think it is that inner city teenagers and young men want to fight the police, shoot at the police, stab the police? Because nobody's given them a respectful view of law enforcement. Nobody has given them the Christian worldview when it comes to submitting to authority. And this is why they end up in places where they are hurt or killed. And so, no, I think the idea of Paw Patrol and putting police in good light in front of people is the one thing that's missing, that's causing the problems. And what you guys want to do is make things worse by telling people to resist the police, to fight the police, to hate the police. What you're doing is making the police officer's job incredibly dangerous, and you're endangering the lives of those people who will fight the police because they won't win. And this is not good. This is just not good. You don't fight the police with your fist. If you need to fight the police, you fight them in court, and you fight them in the court of with rule of law. You fight them at the voting booth. You don't fight them in the streets. And this is the type of thing that Paw Patrol is just helping kids not to do. They're going to have a good view of police rather than fight them. Why would that be a bad thing? How could that possibly be a bad thing? Well, because all the police are racist. No, they're not. There's no way that you can say that.
So I disagree with what Jeremy said about it, because I think cops are heroes and they have to have a difficult job, but we have to have that
All of
fine
them?
life.
Okay, here she said, all of them. Well, no. The point that you're making is that none of them are. Otherwise, your point falls apart. Because if most of them are heroes and most of them are good, then we should reinforce this view of them, right? You can never say all of anybody are heroes. But here's the question: what is a hero? I'll read you a definition here. This is just from the Google definition, Google dictionary definition of the word hero. A person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Yeah. I think this is what police officers are or were designed to be, should strive to be. Are all of them at that level? No. I'm sure there's some who aren't. But this is what they are supposed to be. The office was designed to be a heroic office. And when anyone is not acting heroic, they should be removed. But the entire principle of police is centered around the idea of heroism. I mean, this is normal. And here's a good biblical definition of being a hero. Verse 6 of Romans chapter 5. For when we were yet without strength, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. That's Jesus. For scarcely for a righteous man will one dare to die, yet peradventure for a good man would some even dare to die. Will one die, yet peradventure for a good man would some even dare to die. But God commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Police officers, by nature of their very job, every day, whether they recognize it or not, every day they're going out and they are risking their lives on account of keeping us safe. Now, there are some laws that they enforce that don't keep us safe. But the majority of laws, with the exception of a few bad apples of laws that we should get voted out of existence, but typically these laws are designed to keep the public safe, and these police officers, in order to enforce the laws, are risking their lives. They're risking their own lives for our safety. That is the definition of being a hero. There's no question about that. Now, are there some who don't risk their lives? Are there some who aren't interested in our safety? I suppose. But the office itself, the being a police officer, is designed for heroes. We should remove those who aren't heroes because that's the job description. So we don't need to defund the police. Maybe we need to get rid of police who aren't policing. But police, by their nature, should be heroes. So we should be promoting a heroic view of police officers because that's what the office is designed for. We don't defund it. We don't get rid of it. We say, let's maybe in a few precincts and a few areas, we need to get back to it, I suppose. I suppose that might be the case somewhere. I don't know. I'm sure there's corrupt cops. I'm sure of it. But wherever that exists, that is the antithesis to what being a police officer is. It's the opposite of what the job is. And so this makes no sense. She's saying we should remove police officers from children's shows because a few of them are bad. But the entire office is the opposite of what those few people are. It's like saying we should never go to Wendy's because there's a few Wendy's where they, I don't know, put fish in the burger and it's not actual beef. Okay, but if that takes place somewhere at some Wendy's, somewhere along the line, it's the opposite of what Wendy's is all about. Like Wendy's is all about where's the beef, right? Where's the meat? It's genuine beef. The illustration getting out of hand here. It's getting away with me. But you understand, if that happened somewhere, Wendy's would be like, you're not a Wendy's anymore. You can go call yourself whatever you want, but you're not us. You can't do this and call yourselves Wendy's. But this is the whole point. Police officers everywhere say, you're not a police officer if you're not a hero. And you say, well, we need to defund all the police and make sure nobody looks at the police in a good light. How does that help? No, we need to find the ones who aren't being genuine police heroes and get rid of them because the office of the police officer is for heroes, period. That's what it's all about.
Oh, I'm not, I mean, I'd say a good majority of them. You have bad people in every business and every
Yet,
part.
yet
Well, wait,
a
wait,
lot
wait,
of
wait,
police
wait.
officers have committed atrocious crimes and have gotten away with it and have never been convicted of any of it.
How do you know that? How do you know? I mean, if they've never been convicted of any of it, how do you know? Have you actually looked at all of the evidence from both sides? I mean, if it's has it come to a court of law? If not, you haven't heard the arguments from both sides. You're saying allegedly they have. And I'm sure statistically, somewhere along the line, that has to be true, right? But can it be a lot? How do you know it's a lot of police officers? I mean, you're just guessing. You're just saying this because you want it to be true. You have no idea, ma'am, how many police officers have gotten away with doing terrible things. You don't know how many because you haven't investigated every instance. You haven't actually heard both sides. You have not critically thought through any of the statements that you're making. You are just making statements that have no foundation in fact, and just expecting because you're the teacher, he's got to agree with you. And kudos to Branden for not agreeing.
Person who has family members who are police officers.
Yes, I understand. And this is what I believe. This is my opinion. And this is, not popular to say, but I do support our police and we have bad people and the people that do bad things should be brought to justice. I agree with that. But I think that, say it again.
They haven't.
Prove it. They haven't been brought to justice, she says. Prove it. Give us an example of someone who hasn't been brought to justice. Derek Chauvin. Well, I think that he got far more than what was just for him. Far more. Give us an example of one that hasn't been brought to justice. I mean, we'll examine the case and see if that's actually true. But I don't know of any that when you boil it down and look at the facts and the evidence in the case that haven't been brought to justice. I suppose that there are theoretically some out there, but this is not common. There's no evidence to say that it's common. In fact, a recent survey in 2020, the Census Bureau put out a survey of police statistics, and the number of people from each race committing crimes is the exact same percentage of people from each race who were killed by police. The problem is not that black people are killed by police in a disproportionate rate. The problem is that black people end up being inner city folk, and inner city folk end up committing more crimes, which naturally results in more confrontations with the police. And that's sad. And that, I think, is because of Democrat inner city policies that keep that underclass under their thumb. And that's sad. That is that sad. But again, none of this stuff is actually facts and evidence, ma'am. You are making statements that just aren't true.
Because they're actually supposed to protect and serve the people.
They
not
do
kill
protect
them.
us. Who do we call when we're in trouble and someone has a knife or a gun? We
I wouldn't call the police.
Why wouldn't you call the police?
I don't trust them. My life's in more
Who would
danger
you call?
in their presence.
Professor, who would you call?
I wouldn't call the police. I don't trust them. My life's in more danger in their presence. This is never true. Every person who's ever said this will call 911 if there's a crazy person knocking on their door at 2 o'clock in the morning, screaming and crying and I don't know, whatever. Every person who's ever said this, if someone breaks into their house, they call 911. Every person who's ever said this, if their mom if their senior mom or grandmother is choking on something or whatever, they're going to call 911. Every person who's ever said. So she's not, I don't believe that that's true. But she says, my life is in more danger in their presence. And that is statistically not true. Unless you're committing a crime and you are fighting against the police, which you're kind of encouraging kids to do because you don't want them to see the police in a good light with shows like Paw Patrol. So whose fault is that?
Professor, who would you call?
I wouldn't call anybody.
Well, would you have, if
I'm gonna
someone
protect my
intruded
phone
your
and
house with a gun, would you have a gun on you or?
No.
It's a good question. We don't really have time for the answer. Basically, she ends up saying that she wouldn't call anyone. It would be too late because they've got a gun already. So it would be too late to call. And that's true. You should have a gun, right? But of course, she's not going to advocate for owning guns. So she says, it's my time to go. Yeah. So I guess the place to go if you guys want to, if somebody wants to rob somebody's house is this professor's house, because she's not going to put up a fight. She's my time to go. Okay, take whatever you want. This is sad, and this is just absolutely crazy. Kudos to Branden. Good job standing up and just saying what is right. It's just common sense. This is not conservative versus liberal, guys. This is just critical thinking versus not thinking at all. This is just encountering a question and saying, let me give 10 seconds of thought to this and actually think about whether I'm right before I speak about it. And if a professor can't do that, she shouldn't be a professor. But we know this is the type of people they look for in liberal colleges, especially in Los Angeles. Anyway, that's all of our time for today. Thanks for watching the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, follow, all those things, depending on whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube or on podcast, listening on podcast. Thanks for joining us today, and catch us next time on Point of View.